So the real question is sources. And Paul, this is shocking, but get ready. Paul is our only firsthand witness of the resurrection of Jesus. That is, we don't have anybody in the New Testament talking about Jesus' resurrection that says in the first person, I saw the Lord, 1 Corinthians 9, or last of all, he appeared to me. So that's just absolutely fundamental. And it's interesting, whenever people talk about the resurrection, they go to the Gospels first, and you should go to the Gospels last. And even if they go to the Gospels, too often they're going to go to Matthew because it's everybody's favorite book, I guess, because it's first. Or they're going to go to Luke, who has Jesus appear, I think once on Sunday, and then later, a week later, and John has him appearing and so forth. And Mark, of course, doesn't have appearances in his original ending, but those are all secondary. There's nobody writing those who says, I was there, I saw it. And Paul wasn't there, meaning at an empty tomb, but he does say, I've seen the Lord. And then he does describe to us in two passages what that might have entailed. So two places he says, I've seen the Lord, 1 Corinthians 9, and I would add Galatians, last of all, he revealed his son in me. I'm quoting it wrong, but he says he was set apart for the gospel, Galatians 1, and that when it pleased God to reveal his son in me or to me. If you go with to me, that could be a third. But as far as just an absolute unambiguous statement, I've seen the Lord, that would be 1 Corinthians 9. And then last of all, he appeared to me. Now, the last of all, though, is important because Paul lines himself up with other witnesses that he says he has received testimony from. And what he, as you know, it's 1 Corinthians 15, he breaks it down. He talks about he appeared to Peter and to the 12 and to all the apostles and to James. We have no record of James. Now, in the Ebionite materials, you know, the Hebrew gospel materials that you studied, I know, he does appear to James. And James is actually at the Last Supper, and I present that in my book, The Jesus Dynasty. So if you put it all together, Paul is aware of an appearance to James, and then a mass appearance, almost like you'd think of maybe these Marian ology appearances of Our Lady or something. 500 brethren at once saw him. He knows about that. We have no record of that otherwise. So if you go with our earliest witness, and we could probably date that, you know, very close to the 50s. So let's say 54, 55 CE. That's within 20, 25 years of Jesus's death if he was crucified in 30, which is a good working date to go with. So 20, 25 years later, Paul says, I saw him, or he appeared to me. Literally, the verb is was seen. It's the aorist passive. He was seen by me. He appeared to me. So I like to call it sightings because, you know, when you cite something, I don't want to trivialize it, but, you know, when people say, and this is, people will think I'm being lighthearted here, but, you know, Elvis was seen in the local grocery store. It actually, you know, and then somebody says, well, there have been 5 other sightings of Elvis in Memphis over the past 5 years, and these people swear they saw him. Well, there's, you know, it's not comparable at all, but I'm trying to get the idea of like a sighting, or he was seen, or he appeared, some sort of manifestation of Jesus. Now, this would be 25 years after. But then when you ask him, as his Corinthian correspondents do indirectly, because he's gotten their questions. And one of their questions is, do you have to believe in resurrection? He goes, absolutely. You know, if you're a Christian, you believe in not only that Christ was raised, that Jesus Christ, but that at his coming, those who belong to him will also be raised. Next question. Well, what do you mean raised? Bodies are decayed, bodies are corrupt, people are lost at sea. What kind of a body are you talking about? And he basically says what nobody wants to talk about. He says, God knows. God knows. So you have to ask, what did he actually see? Because if he saw something, he could say, well, I saw this person, 5 to 6 feet tall, and he was shining and he had a white robe. I mean, we have descriptions like that. They're called epiphanies all the way through the Hebrew Bible. The book of Daniel's famous for these. I saw an angel and he was clothed like the sun and he had these garments. He doesn't say that. He doesn't report it as what we would tend to call an epiphany, right? And so when he does this, you have to wonder, why does he not describe the body? So I think what we can say, if we're trying to be really careful here, is we can say that Paul does not report seeing a physical body, because he addresses the question of what kind of body. And if you go to Philippians 3, 20 and 21, 19, 20, 21, I'm not going to turn to these, but that's basically the verses. He does refer to his body, calls it a body. And he says that when Christ appears, the whole thing is our commonwealth, or our government is in heaven, from which we await a Savior, Christ the Lord. And when he appears, he will transform our lowly body, this body of flesh and blood, to be like his glorious body. So whatever Paul saw, it was a glorious body. It would be, in the book of Acts, it's a blinding light. Now, I want to stay with Paul's own testimony in this interview, but it is interesting that the book of Acts presents it like that. Remember, in the book of Acts, when Stephen is martyred, he sees a figure standing at the right hand of God in heaven that he refers to as Jesus, that supposedly is like a human figure, because he says, I see Jesus at the right hand of God. And so that, I think, isn't he the one that says, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit? So this is a different thing. Paul doesn't say that. Paul says that I can't describe the body other than characterize it as glorious, powerful, immortal, no longer of dust, not flesh and blood, but immortal and glorious. So it reminds you of many of the Hellenistic accounts that we have, in which we have a person disappearing. I think Romulus is one of the best known. I think it's Ovid that talks about this in the passage I'm thinking of, where Romulus is giving a discourse to his Roman citizens in Rome on one of the hills, and he begins to rise up and then slowly disappear. And it says his body melts away as he rises. And so Paul apparently has something like that in mind for resurrection. That's in sharp contrast to what we have in the Gospels, where it is a flesh and blood body. So here we have to distinguish, and we have to talk about, what does the word resurrection really mean? In other words, literally resurrection in Greek is anastasis, to stand up. So when you're dead, you're down, right? Lying down in a grave. And when you stand up, you're standing up. It's the revival of a corpse. And that's the normal meaning of resurrection, to stand up or to raise up, egero in Greek. For example, in the Gospels, when Mary Magdalene and the women come to the tomb and they're told by the angel, he's not here, he's been raised up, meaning lifted up, he's gotten up. That idea is not really what Paul calls resurrection. What Paul calls resurrection, I would call more transformation from a lowly, fleshly, mortal, decaying, let's go further, stinking, rotting, corruptible, aging body that is going to lead you to death, to a glorious body that is immortal and is no longer dust. So his big analogy is Adam. He says the first Adam was of the dust, right? Perishable. But the second Adam, he says, is a life-giving spirit. Now, various academics get into arguments and discussions about, but do you need the physical body in order to transform it into the spiritual state? And what they want to do is kind of hold on to the physical. Like the bones, let's say the bones of Jesus were found, that the bones of Jesus matter. And they want to hold on to the physical and say, well, yes, he was transformed, but it's that physical body that was transformed. Well, for Paul, that would only be true of people living at the time. Think about it. Jesus returns in the clouds of heaven. It's very literal. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Thessalonians 4. Very literal. And the dead are raised incorruptible, and the living are transformed. Well, if the dead are raised incorruptible, it doesn't mean they come out corruptible first, like some sort of people call it a zombie apocalypse or something, half skeletal remains or something like that. That's not his idea. And in the book of Revelation, the people who are lost at sea, says the oceans give up the dead that are in them. You're not talking about a physical body anymore. So Paul's view of resurrection has nothing to do with the physical body. Doesn't depend on the physical body. I don't even think it involves the physical body. Now, there is a case that he covers that if I was a flesh and blood living human being, not dead, but living, so this wouldn't be resurrection because I'm not dead. And Jesus returns in the blink of an eye, he says, the twinkling of an eye, the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we, because he thinks he's going to be alive, and we, the living, will be transformed. He doesn't say resurrected. It says transformed, right? From the physical body of dust to the heavenly body of the spirit. And he calls it a life-giving spirit. So the first Adam was dust, second Adam is a life-giving spirit. So for Jesus to come out of the tomb, you know how all Orthodox Christians, evangelical Christians, the most important thing to them is to show that a physical corpse got revived and came out of the tomb, and then ate with people, and they touched his wounds and they saw him. For Paul, that would not be particularly impressive. It would indicate maybe some kind of a miracle that God could revive the dead, make live the dead, but they're not in an immortal state at that point. They're flesh and blood. And Jesus says that. He said, look, I'm not a ghost. I'm not a spirit. I have flesh and bones. So what you've got is two views. One view is what most Christians think is the view, and there's no witness to it whatsoever, that resurrection means a corpse is in a tomb, and on the morning of the third day, the tomb's empty, and that corpse is walking around Jerusalem, showing himself to people. And that's not actually resurrection as Paul understands it, because resurrection is transformation. That would be my motto to leave with you. Resurrection is transformation. It's being transformed from the physical sphere of existence, the mortal sphere, to the immortal. So that would be the main presentation I would give on Paul. And I would argue that that is probably the earliest Christian view, that actually, because it's our earliest we have, and it's the only one we have that's first person. And I think if he thought otherwise, he would have said, I've seen the Lord, in his glorified state, but he doesn't say that. He says, I've seen the Lord. And then he equates what the others saw to that. So I'm going to read backwards. I'm going to stay with Paul, 1 Corinthians 15. I'm not going to go to the Gospels, which I think are derivative and later. When you're talking about proving it, like how are we going to prove it? We need a corpse to come out of a tomb and breathe and live and show the wounds. Otherwise, it could be a ghost, or maybe somebody just hallucinated or imagined. Paul's not worried about that. He believes that what he saw is so real that there's no doubt about it. So if you read backwards from our only witness, he says he appeared first to Peter. Now he uses the same term as last of all he appeared to me. So why should I assume that he appeared as a corpse resuscitated for Peter, but for Paul, it's a transformed being into this heavenly state, immortal, glorious, and powerful. I'm going to read it straight through. Peter also must have seen a glorified Jesus who's been taken away, translated, what we call apotheosis in Hellenistic religions. So I think the earliest views of Christian resurrection, Paul being our only first-person witness, were apotheosis. And if you say, as Celsus later did, well, that could have just been a ghost. It could have been. But these testimonies of these people are that, no, we saw him. We literally saw him in a way that was powerful and amazing, just as people saw angels and so forth. Now, one other evidence of that is embedded in the Gospel of Luke. When Jesus is asked in the Gospel of Luke, it's also in Mark, but Luke has a fuller account. And the reason I'm using Luke is Mark doesn't have appearances, but Luke does. So let's go to Luke and let him tell us what resurrection is like. And according to Luke, when Jesus is asked about a woman with 7 husbands, because they keep dying, right? Remember that? It's like a Sadducee question. They don't believe in resurrection. So what if a woman had 7 husbands and the first one died, and then the second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way to 7? Whose wife will she be in the resurrection because there were 7 men married to her? I mean, so it's one of these crazy hypotheticals people always give when they want to argue religion. You know, like, I'm a pacifist. Oh, really? You're a pacifist? Well, what if someone broke in your house and tied your family up and was torturing them, and you had a gun in your hand, and are you telling me you wouldn't shoot them? You know, it's that kind of thing. So it's basically saying, resurrection's stupid. It's crazy. Who could believe it? Because obviously this woman had 7 husbands, and you can't bring all these people back. It just doesn't make sense. So they didn't believe in resurrection. This was the Sadducees. But what did Jesus answer according to Luke? He says, you err not knowing the scriptures. And then he talks about how God is the God of the living, not the dead. Not the dead. Because all live to him. So it's not like souls living in paradise or afterlife or something like that, as much as they're in the keeping of God. And then he says, in the age to come, those who are worthy to obtain the resurrection will be like angels. They won't marry, they won't give in marriage, neither will they die anymore. So Luke actually has that idea of the resurrection, of being a transformed being, that he likens to some sort of angelic existence, but really higher than angels. Paul shares that view. Paul says to the Corinthians, same letter, 1 Corinthians 6, when they're having their law disputes going to court against each other, he says, I'm ashamed of you. Don't you know that the saints will judge the world? Don't you know that we will judge angels? Well, obviously, you're not going to judge angels in a physical body or if you're dead. So I think we got to start with Paul. And he's very clear, it's a transformed body. So, however, here's the thing. Paul mentions the tomb. He mentions the tomb because he says he was buried. Now, this is the earliest testimony we have of what happened to Jesus when he died. I don't think this is ever pointed out, hardly ever. I never hear it. Everybody's empty tomb, empty tomb. Mark has an empty tomb. Matthew, Luke, John. That's a late tradition, empty tomb. No, it's not a late tradition. The empty tomb is, but not the tomb. The idea of Jesus being buried. What Paul says is he died and he was buried and he was lifted up the third day. Lifted up the way I just explained, meaning in this transformed state. And he actually tells you what that'll be like in 2 Corinthians 5. And here's what he says. If he says we are dwelling in a tent, like a tent, temporary, and later we're going to dwell in a building. Building is permanent. And he says, if we get rid of the tent, that's when you die, your body goes back to the dust. You don't need that body. You're tentless, but you're also homeless. You don't have your house yet. And then he switches to clothing, old clothes, new clothes. So he says, we're clothed in the body. This is the image of Plato, really. We live in the old clothing of the body. Like I touched my body here. This is my soul, or my inner self is not the body. The body decays, the body perishes. It's not important. It's never coming back. It's of no consequence. It's dust. Adam is dust. Jesus is dust. But the life-giving spirit that emerges, he says, is reclothed, or literally further clothed. And then he adds, this is what everybody misses, we do not want to be found naked. So when you take off your clothes, you're naked. You're dead. Your soul is in the keeping of God. And he goes, well, that's not what we want. We don't want to be naked with God. He's using a metaphor, of course. Old clothing body, lose the body, you're naked, meaning nobody. Reclothed, new body. So those are his analogies. So if you draw that all together, would Paul think that the tomb was empty? I would say no. I would say that he would have no interest in a tomb, of any tomb. What if someone in the Corinthian community had died and was buried? And apparently they had, because they're asking him at Corinth, what's going to happen to some of these people in our group that have died? Right? Well, they're in their tombs. Does Paul say, well, go out to the tomb and wait at the entrance, and if Christ comes, they'll walk out? That isn't what he says. He says the dead will be raised incorruptible. Well, if they're raised incorruptible, you don't take bones and rotten flesh and finally dust to heaven. Or if somebody's lost at sea, you don't have to go find their body parts. So this whole idea of mixing the physical with the transformed body of the resurrection, and by the physical, I realize in the Hellenistic world, it's not our category of physical and spirit. For Paul, the human body that's of dust and it perishes when you die. You can call it physical or call it whatever you want. But the new body, he calls a life-giving spirit. He uses the word pneuma, spirit. And it means that it's not of this world. It's of a higher origin. So that's a lengthy exposition of what I think Paul thought about resurrection. And he would not have been impressed at all with a resuscitated corpse. What would that prove about a new creation? That person's still going to die. You know, you have to wonder in Matthew when he has physical resurrections, right? Think of it. This is just the craziest thing in Matthew. Even the most conservative evangelicals have trouble. I'm not going to name any names, but they're out there on YouTube like, well, maybe that's a metaphor. Well, it's not a metaphor to Matthew. I mean, read it. You know, when Jesus dies, the tombs were open and people came out of the tombs and walked around and appeared to people. What are they going to look like? What are they going to look like? Well, if they've been dead 2 or 3 days, I guess they look almost the same. What if they've been dead a year? It's just, you know, this idea of resuscitating corpses getting confused with Paul's view of resurrection. Paul's view of resurrection is a new creation and being turned into one of these sons of God, glorified. He calls Jesus the firstborn of many brothers and sisters, firstborn of this whole family of God.